In 1218, in the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, life was bustling behind the walls of one such castle, and it was far from romantic.
Enough!
Today we will spend a day with Klaus von Bluchendorff, the illegitimate son of a count who runs the castle on behalf of his master. We will see how he combines the roles of administrator, tax collector, and chief of the guard, and learn how his origins affect his life and relationships with those around him.
Settle this now, or I will settle it for you.
Dawn at the castle is no time for laziness. Klaus von Bluchendorff wakes up early when the castle is still asleep. His morning begins with a tour. He inspects the walls, towers, and gates, checking that the night watch has done its duty. He is accompanied by loyal soldiers whom he instructs and supervises. Every little detail matters because the safety of the castle is his personal responsibility. At this time, he is not just an administrator, but a guarantor of order and stability. Castellan is not just a position of castle manager, but a true calling. Klaus must be not only a skilled warrior, but also a talented administrator. His morning is not just a routine inspection, but a strategic check where he assesses the condition of the walls, food supplies, and the combat readiness of the garrison. After his rounds, Klaus heads to the Great Hall, where the administrators await him. This is the time for collecting taxes, resolving disputes, and keeping records. Before him lie scrolls and parchments recording all the castle's income and expenses. He carefully studies the reports, checks the accounts, and makes decisions that affect the lives of hundreds of peasants and craftsmen. It was painstaking and time-consuming work that required not only attention to detail, but also negotiating skills. However, managing the castle was not just administrative work. Klaus was also a judge and diplomat. He had to settle disputes between servants and peasants, pass sentences, and ensure that the laws were enforced. He was the final authority for anyone seeking justice in the castle. At the same time, he had to negotiate with neighboring feudal lords to avoid conflicts and maintain peace. It was a difficult and responsible job that required not only strength, but also wisdom. One of Klaus's most difficult tasks was maintaining order within the castle. Servants and soldiers often clashed with each other, and he had to act as a mediator. He had to be fair and impartial to keep the peace and avoid riots. This was especially difficult given his own position as an illegitimate son, which made him vulnerable to intrigue and gossip. He had to constantly prove his loyalty and competence to keep his place. Thus, the Castellan's day was filled with many responsibilities that required not only physical strength, but also mental abilities. He was the heart of the castle, its brain, and its hands. People's lives depended on his decisions, and he was well aware of this. His work was difficult, but at the same time incredibly important, because without him, the castle could not exist. That is why the Castellan was so important to the castle, as his duties included not only management, but also maintaining order. It was an incredibly difficult and responsible job that required not only strength, but also wisdom. What do you think was the most difficult thing for the Castellan? Leading soldiers or resolving conflicts between servants? Write your answers in the comments. After his rounds, Klaus heads to the Great Hall, where the managers are waiting for him. It's time to collect taxes, settle disputes, and keep records. Before him lie scrolls and parchments recording all the castle's income and expenses. He carefully studies the reports, checks the accounts, and makes decisions that affect the lives of hundreds of peasants and craftsmen. For Klaus, managing the castle was not just a job, but a constant struggle for recognition. As an illegitimate son, he was always under scrutiny. His brothers, the legitimate heirs, saw him as a threat and tried to undermine his authority. Servants and soldiers, aware of his origins, treated him with caution, waiting for the slightest mistake. He had to constantly prove his competence and loyalty to keep his position and respect. This struggle was no less dangerous than a battle on the battlefield. On the battlefield, the enemy was obvious, but in the castle, intrigues were woven behind his back. Klaus had to be careful in his words and actions so as not to give rise to gossip. He had to be fair, but at the same time strict so as not to lose control. It was a game in which he had to always be one step ahead. Klaus's personal life was also full of complications. He could not openly show his feelings and emotions for fear of appearing weak. He had to be reserved and dispassionate, as befitted a Castellan. His relationships with other people were marked by mistrust and suspicion. He could not completely trust even his closest associates, as he knew that they could betray him at any moment. At the same time, he understood that his strength lay in his loyalty. He was loyal to his master, and that was his main advantage. He was ready to give his life for the castle, and everyone knew it. This devotion was his shield against intrigue and his weapon in the struggle for recognition. Klaus was not just the castle's administrator, but a man who lived in constant tension. His days were filled not only with work, but also with the struggle for his place in the sun. He was a man who had to be strong, wise, and just in order to survive in a world where everyone was against him. Every day, Klaus made decisions that could either save or destroy lives. But what do you think was scarier for him? Battle on the battlefield or having to maintain his position when your only flaw is your birth? Let's talk about that later. Despite his position, Klaus possessed a sharp mind and diplomatic talent. He knew how to find common ground with different people, whether they were arrogant knights or simple peasants. He understood that his strength lay not in his origins, but in his ability to unite and lead people. He knew that in order for the castle to prosper, he had to earn respect, not demand it. This was his main weapon in the fight against intrigue. This internal struggle was no less exhausting than the battles. Every day he had to be prepared for betrayal. His brothers, the legitimate heirs, saw him as a threat and tried to undermine his authority. They spread rumors, accused him of incompetence, and tried to turn his servants against him. Klaus had to be constantly on guard to nip these intrigues in the bud. He used his network of informants and spies to keep abreast of everything happening in the castle. At the same time, he understood that his strength lay in his loyalty. He was loyal to his master, and this was his greatest advantage. He was ready to give his life for the castle, and everyone knew it. This devotion was his shield against intrigue and his weapon in the fight for recognition. He was a man who believed in honor and duty, and these principles were his guiding star. Thus, life in the castle in 1218 was not only a struggle against external enemies, but also against internal ones. Intrigue, gossip, and envy were as dangerous as an attack. Klaus was a man who had to not only manage the castle, but also manage people, their fears, and their ambitions. It was a game in which he had to always be one step ahead to save his life and his place. His story is a story of how a person can overcome any obstacle if they have willpower and self-belief. One of Klaus's duties was to train young squires. He taught them not only how to wield a sword and shield, but also how to be disciplined, responsible, and loyal. He gave them lessons in fencing, tactics, and strategy. The training of squires was not only physical but also mental. They studied not only martial arts but also history, heraldry, and law. Klaus used his personal experience to teach them the tactics and strategies that were necessary on the battlefield. He told them about past battles, mistakes, and victories so that they could learn from the examples of others. This was very important, as at that time there were no textbooks or academies where such knowledge could be obtained. Swordsmen also learned horse riding and horse handling. A horse was not just a means of transportation, but a comrade in arms, and a knight's life depended on its condition. Swordsmen had to be able to not only ride horses, but also care for them, clean them, and feed them. This was part of their daily duties, which prepared them for their future life as knights. In addition to combat skills, squires learned etiquette. They had to know how to behave in society, how to address a lord and his guests, and how to serve at the table. This was very important, as the knights were not only warriors, but also part of high society. The training was long and exhausting. Squires spent the whole day training and carrying out orders. But they knew that this was a necessary step on the path to becoming a knight. They dreamed of receiving armor and weapons so that they could fight for their lord. This was their main goal, for which they were willing to endure all hardships. The training of squires was also a way to strengthen loyalty. Squires became part of the castle community and were devoted to their lord. They were ready to give their lives for him, as he was their teacher and mentor. This was very important in a time when loyalty was worth its weight in gold. Thus, the training of squires was not just preparation for war, but a school of life. It taught them discipline, responsibility, honor, and loyalty. It shaped them into future knights who were ready to fight and die for their castle and their lord. This training system was one of the foundations of knighthood, which lasted for many centuries. While the squires trained hard to become knights, dinner was being prepared in the castle. But was it as cheerful as in fairy tales, or did everyone just eat in silence, afraid to say a word? And most importantly, how did they manage not to confuse the Lord with an ordinary servant at the long table? Watch this video to the end to find out the answers to these questions. In the middle of the day, the entire castle gathered in the Great Hall for lunch. This was not just a time for eating, but an important social event. During lunch, Klaus talked with his subordinates, listened to their stories, and dealt with current issues. Lunch in the Great Hall was a strictly regulated event that emphasized the hierarchy. Klaus sat at the head table, which was located on a raised platform. Next to him were his closest associates, and at long tables set perpendicular to the main table sat soldiers, squires, and servants. The food was simple but hearty: bread, soup, dried meat, and ale. Lunches were noisy and cheerful, with servants constantly bustling between the tables, serving food and drinks. During dinner, Klaus did not simply eat, he ruled. He listened to reports, settled minor disputes, and gave instructions. This was a time when he could communicate with people directly, learn about their problems and concerns. This was important to him because he understood that his strength lay in his people. The afternoon was not just a time of rest for Klaus, but an opportunity to see the castle from a different perspective. If he did not go hunting, he could often be found in the smithy. He enjoyed watching the blacksmiths work, listening to the ringing of hammers, and feeling the heat of the forge. Klaus didn't just watch, he talked to the craftsmen, asking if they had enough metal and if their tools were in good working order. He would even pick up a hammer himself and help forge an arrowhead or sharpen a sword blade. It was his way of showing that he was no better than his people, that he was one of them, that he understood the importance of every job. Sometimes Klaus would go down to the stables. He loved horses very much and knew each one by name. He could talk to the grooms for hours, learning about the condition of the animals, their training, and their diet. Horses were not just a means of transportation for him, but comrades in arms who had saved his life more than once. He believed that treating animals well was a sign of strength and nobility. When it rained, Klaus would spend time in the library. It was his refuge, his world, where he could be alone with his thoughts. He read books on strategy, history, and philosophy, but his favorite pastime was studying old maps. He could spend hours looking at them, studying borders, mountains, and rivers, trying to find new routes or strengthen old ones. He understood that knowledge was as powerful as a sword. The evening meal was more formal than lunch. It was a time when Klaus could receive guests, forge alliances, and demonstrate his power and wealth. He loved it when minstrels, bards, and jugglers gathered at the castle. He asked his guests about what was happening in other kingdoms, what news and rumors there were. He was always up to date with current events so that his castle would not become isolated. After dinner, when the guests had left, Klaus often retired to his room to reflect on everything he had heard during the day. He wrote reports to the king about the state of the castle and his estates. He planned for the future, thought out new strategies, and analyzed his mistakes. For him, the castle was not just a place to live, but a living organism that required constant attention and care. He understood that his strength and power did not depend on how strict he was, but on how fair and wise he was. Women also played an important role in the castle. The lady of the castle was responsible for managing the household. She supervised the servants, managed the storerooms and the kitchen. She also did embroidery, sewing, and taught young girls. Her day was filled with many duties. The lady of the castle was not just the lord's wife, but the rightful mistress of the castle. She was responsible for everything that happened inside the castle, from the kitchen to the pantry. Her day began as early as Klaus's. She would go through the pantries checking the food, wine, and candle supplies. She would give instructions to the cooks, servants, and maids, making sure everything was in order. Her work was no less important than that of the Castellan, as the well-being of everyone inside the castle depended on her. Managing the household in a castle was a complex art. The lady of the castle had to be not only a skilled housekeeper, but also an excellent administrator. She had to keep records, monitor expenses, and plan supplies. She had to be fair, but at the same time strict, in order to maintain order among the servants. Her work was very important, as it was up to her whether the castle would prosper or not. In addition to managing the household, the lady of the castle was also involved in other important matters. She spent her time embroidering and sewing, creating beautiful things for herself and for the castle. She also taught young girls etiquette, music, and other arts that were necessary to become good wives. Her day was filled with many responsibilities that required not only physical strength, but also mental abilities. She had to be patient, wise, and able to solve problems. Her work was no less difficult than Klaus's, and she was well aware of that. She was his right hand, helping him manage the castle and maintain order. Thus, the role of women in the castle was very important. They were not just wives and mothers, but full members of society who played a key role in running the castle. They were administrators, mentors, and housekeepers who made the castle a lively and cozy place. Their work was no less important than that of the men, and without them, the castle could not have existed. The castle was guarded around the clock. Soldiers stood on the towers, watched the approaches to the castle, and raised the drawbridge at night. Their work was incredibly important, as the safety of everyone inside depended on it. The soldiers were well-trained and had weapons that were modern for the time. The round-the-clock security of the castle was a complex system that required discipline and constant vigilance. The soldiers, divided into shifts, served on the walls and towers, from where they had a view of the entire surrounding area. Their task was not simply to stand and watch, but to actively monitor any suspicious movements, whether approaching enemy troops or simply uninvited guests. Each soldier knew his post and was ready at any moment to sound the alarm so that the entire castle could prepare for defense. The internal security of the castle was no less important. Soldiers patrolled the corridors, courtyards, and gates, making sure there were no violations. They were also responsible for maintaining order among the servants and guests, resolving conflicts, and preventing disturbances. The training of soldiers was a continuous process. They were not simply given weapons and armor, but underwent rigorous training that included fencing, tactics, and strategy. Klaus personally supervised their training to ensure that they were ready for any challenge. He taught them to work as a team, use the castle's features for defense, and make decisions in critical situations. The soldiers' weapons and armor were modern for their time. They had swords, spears, crossbows, and shields, all crafted by the castle's best blacksmiths. Weapons were not only their tools, but also symbols of their status and loyalty. The soldiers took great care of their weapons and armor, as their lives depended on them in battle. Klaus understood that guarding the castle was not just a duty, but a complex mechanism where every detail mattered. He often spent his nights inspecting the posts. Quietly, in a dark cloak, he climbed the towers and walls to personally ensure that his soldiers were alert. He did not want them to know about his visits in advance. He believed that this was the only way to test their true loyalty and readiness. If he found a soldier who was dozing or distracted, he did not administer public punishment. Instead, he would quietly approach and place his hand on the soldier's shoulder, reminding him of the importance of his duty. This was enough to instill fear and respect. Klaus also paid great attention to the psychological training of his warriors. He knew that fear was the main enemy on the battlefield. Therefore, he often organized exercises that simulated an attack. In these exercises, he forced the soldiers to work in conditions as close to real life as possible, They learned to respond quickly to alarms, take up defensive positions, and work as a team. Such exercises helped them not only hone their skills, but also overcome their fear of the unknown. Klaus always emphasized that discipline and team spirit were their main weapons. The castle's defense system was thought out down to the smallest detail. In addition to the outer walls and towers, there were many hidden passages and hiding places inside. Klaus knew that in the event of an enemy breakthrough, they could be the deciding factor. These passages allowed soldiers to move quickly between towers and deliver supplies unnoticed. Klaus was the only one who knew all these secrets, and he passed them on only to his most trusted captains. This was his strategic advantage and one of the most important elements of the castle's defense. The castle gates also played an important role in the defense. At night, they were closed and the drawbridge was raised so that no one could get inside. The gates were the last line of defense, and guarding them was the most important task. The soldiers who served at the gates were the most experienced and loyal, as they bore a huge responsibility. Thus, the castle's security was a complex system that required discipline, vigilance, and constant training. The soldiers were not just warriors, but defenders who stood guard over order and safety. Their work was incredibly important, as the lives of everyone inside the castle depended on it. It was their calling, and they were proud of their work. Defending the castle was not only the responsibility of the soldiers, but of all its inhabitants. Everyone, from the lord to the servant, knew that in the event of an attack, they had to fulfill their role. It was a kind of martial law that always existed in the castle, even in peacetime. It was the price everyone paid for safety. Klaus was the one who kept this system running by example, by wisdom, and by keeping a watchful eye. He wasn't just a Castellan, he was a shield for his people. After dinner, Klaus went to bed, but life in the castle did not stop. The night watch continued their service, and in the kitchen, preparations were made for the next day. The nightlife of the castle was filled with silence and vigilance. While most of the castle's inhabitants slept, the night watch continued to carry out their duties. Soldiers, divided into shifts, patrolled the walls and towers, making sure no one got in. Inside the castle, life was also bustling. In the kitchen, servants and cooks were preparing for the next day. They cleaned vegetables, cut meat, and prepared dough for bread. Their work was painstaking and laborious, but they knew that the well-being of everyone inside the castle depended on it. The kitchen was the heart of the castle, and its work never stopped for a moment. The nightlife of the castle was also a time for reflection. Klaus could spend hours in his room thinking about his decisions, plans, and the intrigues that were going on behind his back. It was a time when he could be himself, without the mask of the Castellan. It was a time when he could think about his life and his place in the world. He understood that his strength lay in his mind, and he had to use it to survive. After dinner, when Klaus retired to his chambers, life in the castle did not stop, but simply changed its rhythm. Night was a time of silence and special tension, a time when vigilance became the main weapon. The night watch was on duty with redoubled caution. Klaus himself did not sleep for long. He devoted the night hours not only to reflection, but also to working on reports. In his chambers, by the light of an oil lamp, he sorted through letters from allies and spies, analyzed maps, and planned his actions. This was his most productive time, when the peaceful noise of the day did not interfere with his concentration. He believed that it was in silence that the most important decisions were made. At these moments, Klaus was not just a Castellan, but a strategist who saw the castle not as a fortress, but as a chessboard where every move had to be thought out. Even in the kitchen, life was bustling. At night, there was no hustle and bustle, but rather painstaking preparations for the new day. Cooks cleaned vegetables, cut meat, and kneaded dough for the morning bread. Their work was quiet but continuous, and Klaus often went down to check that everything was in order. He knew that the prosperity of the castle depended on every person, every brick, and every piece of bread on the table. His presence at night was not so much a matter of control as a sign of respect for the work of his people. The castle's nightlife was also filled with sounds. You could hear the footsteps of the night watch, the crunch of stones under their feet, the rustle of the wind blowing through the corridors. These sounds were part of the castle, and they created an atmosphere of safety and tranquility. They were a kind of music of nightlife that soothed the castle's inhabitants. Ultimately, the castle's nightlife was an important element that allowed it to exist. It was part of its culture, which made it not just a fortress, but a home. The castle was a place where people could feel safe, and that was the most important thing. Managing the castle was a complex art. Klaus had to be not only a warrior, but also an administrator, a judge, and a diplomat. He had to know every servant, every soldier, and every peasant who worked on his land. He had to make decisions that affected the lives of thousands of people. It was a huge responsibility that required not only strength, but also wisdom. In essence, the Castellan was a multitasking manager of his time. He had to know the condition of every wall, the provisions in the storerooms, and the combat readiness of every soldier. He was responsible for collecting taxes, which were vital for maintaining the castle. He had to know who paid how much and why, and make sure that everyone paid on time. At the same time, he had to be fair so as not to cause a revolt among the peasants. Klaus was also a judge and diplomat. He had to settle disputes between servants and peasants, pass sentences, and enforce the laws. He was the final authority for anyone seeking justice in the castle. At the same time, he had to negotiate with neighboring feudal lords to avoid conflicts and maintain peace. One of Klaus's most difficult tasks was maintaining order within the castle. Servants and soldiers often clashed, and he had to act as a mediator. He had to be fair and impartial to keep the peace and prevent riots. This was especially difficult given his own position as an illegitimate son, which made him vulnerable to intrigue and gossip. He had to constantly prove his loyalty and competence to keep his place. Managing the castle required Klaus to see the big picture. He had to not only solve current problems, but also plan for the future. He had to think about how to increase the castle's income, how to improve its defenses, and how to maintain peace with his neighbors. Thus, managing the castle was not just a job, but a calling. Klaus was a man who lived in constant tension, but at the same time, he was a man who believed in his mission. He was a protector, a judge, and a diplomat who did everything in his power to maintain order and safety. His story is one of how a person can overcome any obstacle if they have the willpower and belief in themselves. A day in a castle in 1218 was filled with hard work, discipline, and tradition. It was a world where everyone knew their place and fulfilled their role. Castles were not just fortresses, but centers of life that maintained order and stability. We spent only one day with Castellan Klaus, but it was enough to understand that life in the Middle Ages was incredibly difficult, but at the same time incredibly interesting. It was full of both dangers and opportunities, and only the strongest and smartest could survive in this world. If you enjoyed this video, please share your thoughts in the comments. What would you like to learn about in our next videos? Perhaps the life of peasants, craftsmen, or travel. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our new videos.